Scarlett grew up trapped in a gilded cage, a family that presented a facade of perfection to the world, yet was rotten at its core. From her earliest memories, she was the family's designated scapegoat. Every mistake, every inconvenient truth, conveniently laid at her feet. Meanwhile, her younger brother, Leo, was the golden child, shielded from all responsibility, his every whim indulged, his flaws overlooked. Scarlett's sacrifices were not acknowledged, they were expected, a silent obligation woven into the fabric of her existence. The simmering resentment reached a boiling point during her tumultuous teenage years. Leo, irresponsible and entitled, committed a grave error, perhaps a major financial fraud or a scandal that threatened the family's carefully constructed reputation. Instead of facing consequences, he was meticulously protected. In a cruel act of betrayal, Scarlett was framed for his transgression, becoming the convenient fall guy. Without hesitation, and driven by a desperate need to protect Leo and their public image, her parents disowned and cast her out, severing ties with chilling finality. Thrown into a world she was utterly unprepared for, Scarlett hit rock bottom. Penniless and alone, with no safety net or emotional support, she was forced to forge her own path. Through sheer grit, relentless hard work, and countless setbacks, she clawed her way up, transforming from a discarded child into a formidable, self-made woman. Years of relentless effort culminated in significant success and uncompromising independence, building a life far removed from the shadowed halls of her past. Just as Scarlett had finally found peace and a semblance of belonging in her new, self-made world, her past resurfaced. Her family reappeared, not with apologies or remorse for the years of neglect and betrayal, but with the same self-serving entitlement. Leo, predictably, had squandered his privilege and was once again in deep trouble, needing a substantial bailout that only Scarlett's hard-earned wealth and influence could provide. This time, however, Scarlett was no longer the vulnerable, sacrificing girl they remembered. The years of struggle had hardened her spirit and sharpened her resolve. She met their manipulative pleas and thinly veiled threats with a steely resolve, refusing to be drawn back into their toxic web. She systematically dismantled their arguments, confronting them with the raw, painful truth of her past, forcing open the old wounds they had so conveniently ignored. This was not just about refusing a request, it was about breaking a generational cycle of abuse and demanding justice for her stolen childhood. In a powerful, definitive confrontation, Scarlett chose herself. She severed all remaining ties, walking away from them forever, not as a broken victim, but as a woman who had finally claimed her sovereignty, her future, and her own story. The silence in the Carrington Manor was never truly silent. It was a pressurized, heavy thing, waiting to crush anyone who dared to breathe too loudly. I stood in the foyer, the marble beneath my feet radiating a coldness that seeped through the soles of my shoes and into my bones. The grandfather clock in the hall ticked with a rhythmic, judgmental cadence, marking the seconds of a life I felt I was borrowing rather than living. To the outside world, this house was a masterpiece of architectural grace, a sprawling estate of white stone and manicured ivy, inhabited by a family that graced the society pages with sickening regularity. To me, it was a museum where I was the only exhibit marked flawed. "Scarlett, stop fidgeting. You look guilty before you've even done anything." The voice drifted down from the top of the mahogany staircase. Leo, my younger brother, the golden boy, the sun around which our parents' desperate orbit revolved. He descended the stairs with that casual, unearned grace that always infuriated me. His shirt was untucked, his hair tousled in a way that would have been charming on anyone else, but on him it just looked like neglect.
I'm not fidgeting, though my hands were indeed twisting the hem of my cardigan. And I haven't done anything. Why did Father call a meeting at this hour? It's nearly midnight. Leo stopped 3 steps from the bottom. The hallway chandelier, a monstrosity of crystal and gold, cast fractured shadows across his face. For the first time, I saw beneath the veneer of his usual arrogance. His eyes were wide, rimmed with red, and his lower lip trembled slightly. He smelled of scotch and stale fear. "Leo?" I stepped closer, my annoyance dissolving into that familiar, weary instinct to protect him. It was a reflex honed over 2 decades of taking the blame for broken vases, failed grades, and minor traffic accidents. What happened? He gripped the banister, his knuckles white. I messed up, Scar. Bad. Worse than before. What is it? The university applications? Did you crash the Mercedes again? The charity gala funds, he whispered, the words rushing out like a confession he couldn't hold back. The devastating drought relief fund. I borrowed some, just to cover a margin call on a trade. I thought I could put it back before the audit on Monday. My stomach dropped, a visceral sensation of freefall. Borrowed? Leo, that's embezzlement. How much? He wouldn't meet my eyes. He stared at the intricate patterns of the Persian rug. 200,000.
The air left my lungs. $200,000? Leo, that's prison. That's not a mistake, that's a felony. Does Father know? He knows the money is missing, Leo said, his voice cracking. The auditors called him this evening. He's in the study with Mother now. He looked up at me then, and the expression on his face wasn't regret. It was a terrifying, pleading calculation. Scarlett, you have to help me. If this gets out, my internship at the firm, my future, the family name. Help you? How can I help you with this? I don't have that kind of money. No, he said, stepping off the last stair and grabbing my shoulders. His hands were clammy. I used your laptop. I used your login because mine was locked out for updates. The IP address, it traces back to your user profile. I froze. The ticking of the clock seemed to stop, replaced by the roaring of blood in my ears. I pulled away from him, stumbling back as if his touch burned. You did what? I didn't mean to, he cried, his voice rising to a desperate whine. It was just convenient. But don't you see? If they think it was me, I'm ruined. I'm the heir, Scar. I'm the one who has to carry the legacy. But you've always been the expendable one, I finished for him, my voice barely a whisper. The betrayal wasn't a sharp knife. It was a dull, heavy stone settling in my chest. It was the culmination of every birthday forgotten, every achievement minimized, every time I was told to be quiet so Leo could speak. Before I could scream, before I could strike him, the double doors of the study opened. My father, Richard Carrington, stood in the doorway. He was a tall man who wore his authority like a suit of armor. Behind him, sitting in a wing-back leather chair, was my mother, Eleanor. She was staring into a glass of white wine, her face a mask of icy composure. Both of you, inside, now, Father said. His voice was low, devoid of emotion. I walked into the study, my legs feeling like lead. The room smelled of old paper, lemon polish, and the metallic tang of an impending execution. Leo trailed behind me, shrinking into himself, playing the role of the frightened child to perfection. Father walked behind his massive oak desk and picked up a stack of papers. He didn't look at Leo, he looked straight at me. We have reviewed the transaction logs provided by the bank's security team, Father began, tossing the papers onto the desk. They fanned out, accusingly white against the dark wood. The transfer was initiated 3 days ago, from the device registered to Scarlett Carrington. Father, I started, my voice shaking, Leo just admitted it to me in the hall. Silence, Mother snapped from her chair. She finally looked up, her blue eyes piercing. Do not dare to drag your brother into your deceit, Scarlett. We know you've always been jealous of him. We know you resent the attention he receives. But to steal from a charity, to sabotage this family's reputation out of spite? I looked at Leo. He was studying his shoes, his posture slumped in feigned shame. He wasn't going to say a word. He was going to let me drown. "I didn't do it," I cried, my voice gaining strength from the sheer injustice of it. "I didn't touch that money. Leo just admitted it to me in the hall. He used my computer because he's incompetent and reckless, and now he's too much of a coward to own up to it." Father slammed his hand on the desk. The sound echoed like a gunshot. "Enough. I will not have you slander your brother to cover your own greed. Leo has been with me at the club every evening this week preparing for his licensure. He has a future. He has potential. And I don't?" I demanded, tears of rage pricking my eyes. "I graduated top of my class. I manage the household accounts. I've kept this family organized for years, while he parties his way through unparalleled privilege. You," Father said, pointing a finger at me, "are a liability. We have tolerated your moodiness, your brooding, your inability to fit into the mold of what this family requires. But this is criminal." The room seemed to tilt. I realized then that the truth didn't matter. They knew. Deep down, they had to know. Leo didn't have the technical skills to hide a transfer like that without leaving a trail, and they knew my computer was password protected, a password only Leo knew because I trusted him. They knew he did it. But Leo was the asset. Leo was the one they had pinned their narcissistic hopes upon. I was just the insurance policy. "You know he did it," I said, my voice dropping to a deadly calm. I looked directly at my mother. "You know." Mother took a sip of her wine, her hand perfectly steady. "I know that my daughter is a thief, and we must mitigate the damage." "Mitigate?" I asked. "The money has been replaced," Father said, smoothing his tie. "I pulled strings, called in favors. The board will view it as a clerical error, provided the rogue element is removed from the equation. We cannot have a thief living under this roof." The horror of their plan dawned on me. They weren't just blaming me, they were discarding me to cauterize the wound Leo had inflicted. "You're kicking me out? For something I didn't do?" "We are severing ties," Father corrected, as if discussing a business merger gone wrong. "You are 18. You are legally an adult. You will leave this house tonight. You will not receive a stipend. You will not use the Carrington name to secure employment. As far as our circle is concerned, you have chosen to leave, to find yourself, due to personal instability." "Instability?" I laughed, a harsh, jagged sound. "You're gaslighting me. You're destroying my life to save his reputation." "We are protecting this family," Mother hissed, standing up. Her silk dress rustled like dry leaves. "Something you obviously care nothing about. Pack a bag, Scarlett, one bag, and leave." I looked at Leo one last time. He finally raised his head. There was moisture in his eyes, but behind it there was relief, a profound, sickening relief. He mouthed the words, "I'm sorry." "No, you're not," I said aloud. "You're pathetic." I turned my back on them. I didn't cry. The tears had evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard ember of fury in the pit of my stomach. I walked out of the study, past the grandfather clock that was still ticking away the seconds of my destruction. I went to my room, the room I had grown up in, with its pale yellow wallpaper and the window seat where I used to read for hours to escape the tension of the house. I didn't pack clothes. I didn't pack the expensive electronics. I took a sturdy canvas duffel bag. I packed my journal, a few changes of practical clothes, my comfortable boots, and the wad of cash I had saved from birthdays over the years, perhaps $300. It was raining when I came back downstairs. The house was silent again. The study door was closed. They hadn't even waited to see me out. They had simply retreated back into their fortress of denial, already rewriting the narrative of the night.
I opened the heavy front door. The wind lashed at me, cold and biting. I stepped onto the porch and pulled the door shut behind me. The click of the latch in Beijing sounded final, like the dropping of a guillotine blade. Standing there on the wet pavement, the rain plastering my hair to my face, I looked back at the house. The windows were glowing with warm, golden light, a perfect picture of domestic tranquility. Inside, they were likely pouring another drink, congratulating themselves on handling the crisis. I was penniless, I was homeless, I had no reference, no degree, no allies. The fear should have been paralyzing, and it was there, gnawing at my edges, but beneath the fear was something else, a strange lightness, the weight of their expectations, their criticism, their conditional love. It was gone. I was alone in the dark, soaking wet, shivering, and discarded. But as I turned away from the gilded cage and began to walk down the long, winding driveway toward the iron gates, I realized something. They had taken everything from me, yes, but they had also set me free. "Goodbye," I whispered into the darkness, my voice swallowed by the storm. I didn't look back again. I just kept walking, one foot in front of the other, into a world that didn't care who I was, determined to survive just to spite them.
The first night in the motel, I didn't sleep. I sat on the edge of the mattress, my fingers digging into the synthetic floral-patterned bedspread, listening to the hum of the vending machine outside the thin door. The room smelled of stale cigarette smoke and industrial lemon cleaner, a scent that would become the olfactory backdrop of my new existence. I stared at my reflection in the cracked bathroom mirror, expecting to see the daughter of a prestigious dynasty looking back. Instead, I saw a stranger with hollow eyes and hair that had lost its expensive sheen. My stomach cramped, a sharp, twisting reminder that I hadn't eaten in 24 hours. In my old life, hunger was a choice, a prelude to a garnish-heavy dinner prepared by a private chef. Here, it was a threat. I counted the crumpled bills in my pocket for the 10th time. $42. That was the sum total of my worth. "Okay," I whispered to the empty room, my voice raspy. "Okay." It wasn't okay. It was terrifying, but the panic was a luxury I couldn't afford. The tears I wanted to shed felt stuck in my throat, calcified by a rage that was slowly hardening into fuel. The descent was unglamorous. I found work at a diner 3 blocks from the motel, a place where the grease hung in the air like a heavy fog. I wasn't Scarlett the heiress anymore. I was just the girl who refilled the ketchup bottles and wiped down sticky vinyl booths. My feet, accustomed to Italian leather, blistered and bled in cheap canvas sneakers. "Hey, new girl, table 4 needs coffee." The manager, a man named Rick with a permanent scowl and a sweat-stained shirt, shouted across the pass. I moved automatically, grabbing the pot. "Coming, Rick." "And smile, for God's sake. You look like you're at a funeral." I forced the corners of my mouth up, the muscles twitching with the effort. In a way, I was at a funeral. I was mourning the girl who thought love was unconditional. Every tip I pocketed, quarters, dimes, the occasional single-dollar bill, felt like a stone I was using to build a fortress. I hoarded them. I ate the mistakes from the kitchen, burnt toast, cold fries, so I could save every cent for rent on a basement studio that smelled of mildew and despair. 6 months in, the numbness began to fade, replaced by a sharp, predatory ambition. I was cleaning the counter when a discarded newspaper caught my eye. The headline was about a real estate boom in the downtown district, a world of glass and steel rising from the ashes of old industry. I stared at the photo of a sleek high-rise. It looked cold, impenetrable, and safe. I quit the diner the next day.
I spent my meager savings on a second-hand suit that was a size too big and a pair of scuffed heels I polished with black marker. I walked into the offices of Sterling and Associates, a mid-level real estate firm known for hiring aggressive agents, and demanded to see the broker. The receptionist, a woman with cat-eye glasses, looked me up and down with open disdain. "Mr. Sterling doesn't see walk-ins." "Tell him I'm not a walk-in," I lied, my voice steady despite the hammering of my heart against my ribs. "Tell him I'm his new top earner." She blinked, surprised by the audacity, and picked up the phone. 10 minutes later, I was sitting across from Elias Sterling. He was a small man who seemed to occupy more space than his frame allowed, surrounded by mahogany and the smell of expensive cologne. He didn't ask me to sit. "Your receptionist says you're delusional," Sterling said, not looking up from a file on his desk. "I'm inclined to agree. You have no license, no resume, and your suit is cheap." I didn't flinch. I had practiced this conversation in the shower, in the dark of my basement apartment, on the bus ride over. "You have a listing on 4th and Grand, the warehouse conversion. It's been on the market for 8 months. Sterling finally looked up. His eyes were hard, assessing. "It's a difficult property. The zoning is a nightmare." "It's not the zoning," I countered, leaning forward slightly, placing my hands flat on his desk. "It's the narrative. You're trying to sell it as luxury loft space for families. It's not for families. It's for people who want to feel like they own the city but don't want to deal with the suburbs. It's industrial chic for the bachelor market. I can sell it in 2 weeks."
Sterling laughed, a dry, barking sound. "You can you? And why should I let a nobody touch a $3 million listing?" "Because I'm hungry," I said, dropping the veneer of politeness. "Because I have nothing to lose, Mr. Sterling. Your other agents are comfortable. They have mortgages and safety nets. If I don't sell this, I don't eat. Put me on commission only. No base salary. If I fail, it costs you nothing. If I succeed, you get the commission on a dead property." He studied me for a long, agonizing minute. The silence stretched, filled only by the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. I could feel the sweat trickling down my spine, but I held his gaze. I channeled every ounce of the entitlement I had been raised with, weaponizing the very arrogance I used to despise. 2 weeks, Sterling said finally, leaning back in his chair. "You have 2 weeks. If you don't close, don't bother coming back for your things." I closed it in 9 days. That sale was the first brick in the wall. The check I received was more money than I had seen in my entire life. Yet I didn't spend it on luxury. I moved out of the basement into a clean, secure apartment on the 10th floor of a building with a doorman. I bought tailored suits that fit like armor. I studied the markets until my eyes burned, learning the cadence of the city, the ebb and flow of capital. Years blurred into a relentless climb. I didn't date. I didn't make friends. I worked 18-hour days, fueled by espresso and spite. Every time exhaustion threatened to pull me under, I remembered the sound of the front door locking behind me when my parents kicked me out. I remembered the silence of the phone that never rang. I became known as the closer for the impossible deals, the ice queen of the avenue. I wore the nickname like a badge of honor. It meant they couldn't touch me. By 26, I had left Sterling to start my own firm, Vantage Properties. By 28, I was a millionaire. By 30, I was a force of nature. The transformation was physical as well as financial. I cut my hair into a sharp, angular bob. I learned to walk differently, not with the tentative steps of a girl trying to please, but with the heavy, rhythmic stride of a woman who owns the ground beneath her feet. I curated a life of absolute control. My penthouse was a sanctuary of white marble and minimalist art, high above the noise, high above the grime where I had once started. One Tuesday evening, late in November, I stood by the floor-to-ceiling window of my office, looking out over the city skyline. It was raining, the lights of the skyscrapers blurring into streaks of gold and crimson against the glass. The reflection staring back at me was unrecognizable from the girl in the Motel 6. This woman was polished, severe, and undeniably powerful. My assistant, a sharp young man named David, knocked softly on the glass door. "Miss Blackwood?" he asked, hesitating. "The contracts for the Merriweather acquisition are ready for your signature." I didn't turn around immediately. I took a sip of the sparkling water in my hand, savoring the cold, clean taste. "Leave them on the desk, David. I'll handle them before I leave." "Is there anything else, ma'am? It's past 8. "No, go home to your family, David." "Good night, Miss Blackwood." When the door clicked shut, the silence returned, thick and comforting. I walked over to the desk, running my hand along the cool mahogany surface. I picked up the heavy fountain pen, the weight of it familiar and grounding. I signed my name, Scarlett Blackwood, with a flourish. The ink was black and permanent. I had done it. I had clawed my way out of the pit, scraping my knees and elbows raw, and built a cathedral of success on the bedrock of my own trauma. I needed no one. I owed no one. The vulnerability of my youth had been cauterized. I walked back to the window, pressing my hand against the cold glass. Down below, the city churned, a beast I had tamed. I finally felt it, the sensation I had chased through hunger and humiliation and exhaustion. I was safe. I was untouchable. The past was a foreign country, and I had burned the bridge that led back to it. Or so I told myself, as I watched the rain wash over the city I now owned.
The silence in my office on the 42nd floor was not empty, it was expensive. It was a carefully curated quiet, insulated by triple-paned glass that turned the chaotic symphony of Manhattan into a mute, twinkling diorama far below. I took a slow sip of my espresso, the ceramic cool against my lip, the liquid bitter and sharp on my tongue, the taste of control. I ran a hand over the surface of my desk. It was a slab of reclaimed teak, rough-hewn and solid, anchoring me to the floor. 10 years ago, I didn't own a table. Now I owned the building. I adjusted the cuffs of my silk blouse, catching my reflection in the darkened window. The woman staring back was sharp-edged, tailored, and impenetrable. The frightened girl who had been thrown out into the rain with a garbage bag of clothes was gone, buried under layers of grit and accumulated equity. The intercom on my desk buzzed, a harsh, jagged sound that sliced through the calm. I flinched, a microscopic twitch of the shoulder that no one else would have seen, but I felt it. I pressed the button. "Yes, Sarah?" "Miss Sterling?" My assistant's voice came through, strained and pitched a semitone higher than her usual professional alto. I have people here to see you. They don't have an appointment, and security usually—" She cut herself off, a rare stumble. "They claim to be your parents." The air in the room seemed to vanish. My lungs locked, refusing to draw breath. For a second, the office tilted. The scent of fresh coffee and leather was replaced by the phantom smell of old lavender sachets and disappointment, the olfactory signature of my childhood home. "Miss Sterling?" Sarah asked, panic bleeding into her tone. "Shall I call security?"
I closed my eyes, counting backward from 5. 5. You are the CEO of Sterling Ventures. 4. You have a net worth that would make your father choke. 3. You are safe. 2. You are not 12 years old. 1. No, I said, my voice sounding foreign, like it was coming from a speaker across the room. Send them in. I stood up. I needed to be standing. I moved to the center of the room, putting the massive teak desk between the door and myself. It was a barricade, a fortress wall. I clasped my hands behind me to hide the tremor in my fingers. The heavy oak doors swung open. Time is a cruel artist. In my nightmares, my parents were giants, looming figures of judgment and scorn, frozen in the moment they cast me out. But the people who walked into my office were shrunken. My mother, Evelyn, entered first. She was still beautiful in that brittle porcelain way she cultivated, but the lines around her mouth had deepened into permanent brackets of dissatisfaction. She wore a cream-colored coat that I recognized from a season 3 years past, a subtle sign of decay I wouldn't have noticed before I learned the language of wealth. Richard, my father, followed. He walked with a slight limp I had never seen before. His suit was impeccable, charcoal gray, but it hung loosely on his frame, as if he were slowly evaporating inside it. And then there was Leo. My breath caught in a jagged hitch. My brother, the golden child. He trailed behind them, looking perpetually 25 despite pushing 30. He wore a navy blazer that was too casual for the setting, his hair styled in that effortless disarray that cost a fortune to maintain. But his eyes were darting around the room, assessing the art on the walls, the view, the furniture, with a hunger that made my skin crawl. They stopped 3 feet from my desk. The silence stretched, taut and vibrating.
"Scarlett," my mother breathed. She took a step forward, her hands fluttering up as if to embrace me, then dropping when she saw the ice in my posture. "My God, look at this place." "Hello, Mother," I said. I didn't offer a seat. I didn't offer water. "Is that how you greet us?" My father's voice rumbled, though it lacked the thunder I remembered. He adjusted his tie, a nervous tick disguised as authority. "After all this time, we had to argue with that girl at the front desk for 10 minutes. "She was doing her job," I replied, my tone flat. "Appointments are required, for everyone." "We're hardly everyone," Leo piped up. He had wandered over to the wet bar in the corner, picking up a crystal decanter of whiskey and inspecting the label. "Family discount on the rules, right, Scar?" Scar. The nickname scraped against my nerves. He set the decanter down with a clink that sounded like a gunshot in the quiet room. "Leave it," I commanded. Leo blinked, a flash of irritation crossing his face before he masked it with a lazy grin. "Touchy. Nice view, by the way. Better than the view from the guest house back home." "Why are you here?" I asked, cutting through the pleasantries before they could take root. "It's been 7 years. The statute of limitations on sentimentality has run out." My mother sighed, a dramatic, tragic exhale that used to make me scramble to fix whatever I had supposedly broken. Now it just sounded like bad acting. She walked to one of the velvet guest chairs and sat down, uninvited, smoothing her skirt. "We wanted to see you, Scarlett," Evelyn said, her eyes wide and glistening with unshed tears. "We heard about the magazine cover. Forbes, was it? We were so proud." I felt a bitter laugh bubble up in my throat, but I swallowed it down. "Proud," I repeated. "You threw me out with $50 and a suitcase because your son embezzled from the charity fund. You told the police it was me to save his internship." The room went cold. Leo looked at his shoes. Richard cleared his throat aggressively. "That was a complicated situation, Scarlett," my father said, waving his hand dismissively as if swatting away a gnat. "We did what we had to do to protect the family name.
You were young, we knew you were resilient. And look, he gestured around the room with a sweeping arm. This empire, you needed that push. The revisionist history was breathtaking. They had reframed my abandonment as a parenting strategy. I didn't need a push, I said, gripping my own wrist behind my back so hard my nails dug into the skin. I needed parents. But let's skip the therapy session. You're not here because you're proud. You're here because you want something. I looked directly at Leo. What did he do this time? Leo's head snapped up. I didn't do anything. It's just, the market is volatile right now, and I had some exposure to... He's in trouble, Scarlett, my mother interrupted, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. She leaned forward, clutching her purse with white-knuckled intensity. Terrible trouble. There are people, unsavory people. Gambling? Investments, Leo insisted, his face flushing red. High-risk venture capital. It was a sure thing, but the regulatory commission got involved and the liquidity locked up. And these guys, they don't care about SEC filings, Scarlett. They want the principal back by Friday. I walked around the desk, the heels of my shoes clicking rhythmically on the hardwood. I leaned against the edge of the teak slab, crossing my arms. I looked at them, really looked at them. They were terrified. For the first time in my life, I held all the cards, and they knew it. How much? I asked. My father answered. He couldn't look me in the eye. He stared at a point over my left shoulder. 4 million. The number hung in the air. $4 million. To them, it was a lifeline. To me, it was a quarterly projection error, a tax write-off. But the money wasn't the point. It was the audacity. And you don't have it, I stated. It wasn't a question. The trust fund? Depleted, Evelyn whispered. The market, the house repairs, and Leo's previous ventures. So you're broke, I said brutally. We are temporarily illiquid, Richard corrected stiffly. We are offering you an opportunity, Scarlett, to help your family, to reinvest in your heritage. Once the estate settles, once the markets turn... Stop, I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it stopped him mid-sentence. I looked at Leo. He was sweating now, a sheen of moisture on his upper lip. He looked like a child waiting for his mother to clean up a spill. He looked exactly like he did the night the police came to our door 7 years ago, when he stood behind my father and watched me take the fall for his signature on those checks. You want me to write a check for $4 million to pay off loan sharks for Leo, I summarized. It's not just for Leo, my mother pleaded. If he gets hurt, if this comes out, the scandal would destroy us, Scarlett. The reputation we've built for 50 years. Your father's heart couldn't take it. My reputation? I asked softly. What about my reputation? The one you destroyed when you told everyone I was a thief and a liar? I had to change my last name to get a job interview, Mother. I scrubbed toilets in a hostel for 6 months because no one would hire the sterling thief. That's in the past, Leo snapped, his fear giving way to his innate entitlement. Why do you have to be so dramatic? You clearly landed on your feet. You're rich. You have all this. He gestured angrily at the office. 4 million is nothing to you. Why are you making us beg? We're family. The word family again. It felt like a hook in my gut. I walked over to the window. The city sprawled out below me, a grid of steel and ambition. I had built this life brick by brick, tier by tier. I remembered the nights I slept in my car. I remembered the hunger that felt like a physical hollow in my chest. I remembered the loneliness that was absolute and crushing. And through it all, they had been in their mansion, drinking wine, patting Leo on the head, erasing me. Now, the golden child was tarnished, and the scapegoat held the checkbook. I turned back to face them. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage, but my face was a mask of granite.
You assume, I said slowly, enunciating every syllable, that because we share DNA, I owe you my survival. You assume that my success is a communal resource. It's duty, Scarlett, my father said, herning, trying to summon the old intimidation. We raised you, we gave you a childhood of privilege. You gave me a childhood of conditioning, I corrected. You raised me to be the spare part, the donor organ for Leo's failures. How dare you? Evelyn gasped, clutching her pearls. We loved you. You loved the idea of a perfect family, and when the picture got messy, you cropped me out. I moved back to my chair and sat down. The leather creaked softly. I placed my hands flat on the desk. You come into my office, uninvited, you interrupt my day, and you demand $4 million to fix a mistake that Leo made, just like you demanded I fix his mistakes when we were children. The script hasn't changed. The only thing that has changed is the person sitting in the power seat.
Leo stepped forward, his hands balling into fists. Just give us the money, Scarlett. Stop being a bitch. You know what they'll do to me if I don't pay. I can imagine, I said calmly. Broken legs, a few missing fingers, maybe worse. Leo paled, the blood draining from his face. You wouldn't let that happen. You're my sister. Am I? I tilted my head. When was the last time you called me sister before today? Was it before or after you let Dad throw my clothes onto the driveway? The silence that followed was suffocating. My mother was weeping now, soft, muffled sobs into a lace handkerchief. My father looked gray, his bluster deflating into the reality of his desperation. Leo looked like a cornered animal. They expected me to cave. They relied on the old programming, the deep-seated need of the neglected child to finally please the parents, to finally buy the love that was never free. They thought that by showing up, by acknowledging my existence, by asking for my help, they were bestowing a gift upon me, the gift of relevance. I felt the old wounds throbbing, the rejection, the injustice, the yearning. It would be so easy to write the check, to be the savior, to hear my father say, "Good job, Scarlett." But then I looked at Leo's eyes. There was no remorse there, only expectation. He didn't want my help, he wanted my utility. I opened the leather-bound folder on my desk and uncapped my fountain pen. The sound of the cap clicking off was sharp. $4 million, I murmured, staring at the blank paper. Yes, my father exhaled, his shoulders sagging in relief. Yes, 4. We can discuss a repayment plan, of course, once the estate. I'm not writing a check, I said. I didn't look up. I watched the ink shine on the nib of the pen. What? Leo choked out. I looked up then, my eyes met his, and I let him see everything. The anger, the steel, the absolute absence of the sister he thought he could manipulate. I said, I'm not writing a check. I repeated clearly, not for you, not for them, not today. You can't be serious, Evelyn wailed, dropping the handkerchief. He's your brother. They will kill him. Then perhaps, I said, leaning back in my chair, he should have thought about that before he gambled money he didn't have. Scarlett, be reasonable, my father growled, stepping toward the desk, his hands twitching as if they wanted to slam them down. We are talking about his life. We are talking about the family. I know exactly what we are talking about, I said, my voice rising, finally letting a fraction of the fire show. We are talking about consequences. For the first time in this family's history, we are going to talk about consequences. I pressed the intercom button again. Sarah? Yes, Miss Sterling? I'm holding my calls for the next hour and cancel the lunch meeting. We're going to be a while. I released the button and interlaced my fingers. Sit down, I ordered them. It wasn't a request. If you want to talk, we're going to talk. But we aren't going to talk about money. We're going to talk about the truth. And it's going to hurt.
Leo slumped into the chair next to my mother. My father remained standing for a moment, his jaw working, before he slowly, reluctantly lowered himself into the seat. They looked like prisoners awaiting sentencing. The air in the room was electric, charged with the ozone of a storm that had been brewing for 20 years. I wasn't the scared teenager anymore. I wasn't the victim. I was the judge, the jury, and for the first time, the executioner of their illusions. "Let's begin," I said.
The air conditioning in my private conference room was set to a crisp 68 degrees, a temperature designed to keep minds sharp and negotiations short. Yet, looking across the expanse of the polished obsidian table, I could see a bead of sweat tracing a slow, jagged path down my father's temple. Silence hung heavy in the room, thick and suffocating, interrupted only by the rhythmic drumming of my own fingers against the cool stone surface. I didn't speak. I didn't have to. I let the silence stretch, twisting it like a tourniquet, watching them squirm under the fluorescent hum of a reality they had never anticipated. Opposite me sat the trinity of my past trauma: Richard, Victoria, and Leo. My father, Richard, wore a suit that looked expensive from a distance, but revealed fraying cuffs upon closer inspection, a perfect metaphor for the family name. My mother, Victoria, sat with her spine rigid, clutching her Hermes bag as if it contained the last remnants of her dignity. And Leo looked like a child playing dress-up in a man's world, his eyes darting around the room, unable to settle on anything, least of all me. 5 million. I said, finally, my voice devoid of inflection. I let the number hang in the air, tasting the audacity of it. You come here, to my office, after 10 years of silence, and you ask for $5 million. Richard cleared his throat, a wet, rattling sound. He straightened his tie, attempting to summon the authoritarian command that used to make me tremble in my childhood bedroom. "It is an investment, Scarlett, a bridge loan. The market has been volatile. Leo's venture has immense potential, but we possess a liquidity issue. Temporary, entirely temporary." "A liquidity issue," I repeated, arching a brow. "Is that what we're calling embezzlement these days? Or is it gambling debts? The rumors in the city are quite specific, Richard." "How dare you?" Victoria hissed, her composure cracking. "Your brother has been working himself to the bone. He has been victimized by unscrupulous partners. We came to you because we hoped that despite everything, family still meant something to you." I swiveled my chair slightly, engaging the heavy hydraulics, and looked at my mother. Really looked at her. I saw the map of wrinkles she tried to hide with expensive creams, the tightness around her mouth that came from years of keeping secrets. "Family," I mused, the word tasting like ash. "That's a curious word for you to use, Mother. Let's parse that. Family protects one another. Family nurtures. Family does not frame their 16-year-old daughter for corporate theft to save their son from a juvenile detention center." Leo flinched, physically recoiled, as if I had slapped him. That was a misunderstanding, Scarlett. You're holding on to ancient history." "Ancient history?" I leaned forward, planting my elbows on the table, invading their comfortable delusion. "I spent my 18th birthday in a shelter because you threw me out on the street. You told the police, the neighbors, and every aunt and uncle that I was a thief. You erased me. You scrubbed me from the family photos. And now you want me to write a check?" "We did what we had to do to protect the family name." Sam slammed his hand on the table, though the thud lacked the thunder it once held. "You were strong. You could handle the fallout. Leo is sensitive. He needed guidance. We knew you would survive." I laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound that seemed to startle the stillness of the room. "I didn't survive because of your faith in my strength, Father. I survived in spite of your attempt to destroy it. Do you understand the difference? We are not here to relitigate the past.
Victoria interjected, her tone shifting from indignation to a wheedling sort of desperation. She reached out, her manicured hand hovering over the table as if to touch mine, though the distance was too great. Your brother is in trouble, real trouble, Scarlett. If he doesn't cover these positions by Monday, there will be legal ramifications, prison.
Prison, I said softly. The very fate you sacrificed me to avoid for him a decade ago. It seems poetic, doesn't it? Leo looked up then, his eyes wet and red-rimmed. Scarlett, please. They're going to ruin me. I have a fiancé. I have a life. If this gets out, I'm done. You have so much now. Look at this place. He gestured vaguely at the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the skyline I had conquered. This money, it's nothing to you. It's a rounding error on your balance sheet. Why do you have to be so cruel? The accusation hung there, vibrating with the entitlement that had been spoon-fed to him since birth. Cruel? I stood up slowly. I walked over to the sideboard where a pitcher of ice water sat sweating onto a silver tray. I poured a glass, taking my time, letting them wait. I took a sip, the cold liquid grounding me, before turning back to face them. Let me explain what cruelty is, Leo. Cruelty is watching your sister pack a trash bag with her clothes while your parents scream that she is a disgrace. Cruelty is silence. Cruelty is 10 years of missing birthdays, graduations, and holidays, only to reappear the moment the ATM PIN code is required. I walked back to the table, but didn't sit. I towered over them. You say this money is nothing to me. You are wrong. Every cent represents a morning I woke up alone and terrified. Every dollar is a testament to a shift I worked when I was sick, a deal I closed when I was exhausted, a battle I fought without a safety net. This money is my blood, and you want to drain it to fill a bucket that has a hole in the bottom. You have become hard, Victoria whispered, shaking her head. This isn't the daughter I raised. You didn't raise me, I corrected her, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. You managed me. You tolerated me, and when I became a liability, you liquidated me. I raised myself, and the woman standing before you, the one you are calling hard, is the only reason I am not dead in a ditch somewhere. Richard stood up, his face flushing a mottled purple. That is enough. We are your parents. We gave you life. You owe us respect, if nothing else. I demand you help your brother. It is your duty. Duty is a two-way street, Richard. I pressed a button on the intercom console built into the table. Miss Halloway? Yes, Miss Sterling? Please have security on standby near the elevators. My guests will be leaving shortly. Understood. The color drained from Leo's face completely. Scarlett, no, you can't. You can't leave me hanging. They'll come for the house. They'll come for everything. Then let them, I said, looking him dead in the eye. Sell the house, Leo. Sell the Porsche I know you have parked in the garage. Get a job. Start at the bottom. Learn what it feels like to earn $1 rather than beg for one. You can't be serious, Victoria gasped, clutching her chest theatrically. You would watch your own brother be destroyed. I am watching him face the consequences of his actions for the first time in his life. I am actually doing him the only kindness anyone has ever shown him. I am refusing to enable the delusion that he is above the law. I picked up the dossier they had slid across the table earlier, the business plan that was nothing more than a desperate attempt to cover up a Ponzi scheme. I held it up, letting the glossy pages catch the light. You came here thinking you could manipulate the little girl who just wanted to be loved. I tossed the folder back to them. It landed with a slap that echoed like a gavel strike.
But she's not here. She died the night she locked the door behind her. The woman sitting in this chair is a CEO, and looking at this proposal, looking at you, I see a bad investment. High risk, zero return. The answer is no."
"Scarlett!" Leo's voice was a whimper now. "No!" I repeated, louder this time, letting the word fill the room, bouncing off the glass and the mahogany. "No to the money, no to the guilt, no to the narrative that I owe you anything other than the courtesy of not having you escorted out by force right this second." The silence returned, but this time it wasn't heavy. It was clear, crystalline. I watched as the realization settled over them. The old keys didn't work. The old buttons didn't trigger a response. The machine of their manipulation had rusted shut, and I was the wrench in the gears. My father looked at me, and for the first time in my life, I saw fear in his eyes. Not anger, not disappointment. Fear. He realized that the balance of power had not just shifted, it had vanished. I held the world, and they were just tourists standing on the edge of a cliff. "You will regret this," Richard muttered, though he sounded unsure. "You will die alone in this glass tower." "Perhaps," I said, a small, genuine smile touching my lips. "But it will be my tower, and I will have paid for every square inch of it myself." I pointed to the door. "Get out." The silence that followed my final declaration was not empty. It was heavy, suffocating, a physical weight that pressed against the floor-to-ceiling glass of my corner office. The air conditioning hummed a low, sterile note, indifferent to the wreckage of a family scattered across the plush cream carpet. My mother, Eleanor, sat frozen on the edge of the leather guest chair. Her hand, usually so steady when holding a champagne flute or a gavel at a charity auction, trembled as she clutched her pearl necklace. It was a nervous tick I remembered from childhood, a signal that her carefully curated reality was fracturing. Opposite her, my father, Robert, had turned a mottled shade of crimson, his jaw working silently as he stared at the polished mahogany of my desk, unable to meet my eyes. And Leo. My brother stood by the window, looking down at the sprawling city of Chicago as if looking for an escape route. He looked diminished. The golden light that had seemingly followed him his entire life had finally flickered out, leaving a man in his 30s with the posture of a scolded toddler. "So," I said, my voice sounding strange to my own ears, calm, detached, like a surgeon pronouncing a time of death. "That is all there is to say." "Scarlett, darling," my mother whispered, the endearment slipping from her tongue like oil. She tried to smile, but it was a grotesque distortion, panic pulling at the corners of her mouth. "We're emotional. We've upset you. We can see that now. But to say you're done, to say you won't help your own flesh and blood." "I am not emotional, Mother," I corrected, leaning back in my chair. The leather creaked, a sharp sound in the quiet room. "For the first time in my life, I am entirely rational. I have looked at the ledger of our relationship, and the debt is not mine. It never was." "It's just money, Scarlett." Leo spun around, his face wet with perspiration. The desperation broke through his facade of indifference. "You have so much of it, you swim in it, and you'd let me go to prison over numbers on a screen?" I looked at him, really looked at him. I tried to find the brother I had once worshipped, the boy I had taken the fall for so many times because I believed he was too fragile for the world. I saw only a parasite, bloated on privilege, starving for his next host.
"It isn't just money, Leo," I said softly. "It's the price of admission to my life, and you can't afford it." "You vindictive little bitch," my father spat. The venom was familiar. It was the same tone he'd used when he threw me out at 19, handing me a garbage bag of clothes and locking the front door. "We made you. We gave you the drive to become this tycoon. You owe us your success." I stood up. The movement was slow, deliberate. I placed my palms flat on the desk, feeling the cool, smooth wood grounding me. "You didn't make me," I said, holding his gaze until he flinched. "I broke you. I made myself from the pieces you threw away, and I'm not paying you royalties on my survival."
I reached for the intercom button on my console. The plastic felt cold under my fingertip. This was it, the precipice. "Don't!" my mother gasped, rising halfway from her chair. "Scarlett, please, if you send us away like this, if you let Leo fall, the scandal, think of the name, think of our name." "My name," I said, "is safe. Yours is no longer my concern." I pressed the button. "Ms. Holloway, please send in security. Escort my guests to the lobby." "Right away, Ms. Sterling." The seconds that ticked by before the door opened were the longest of my life. My mother began to weep, not the silent, elegant tears of a martyr, but ugly, gasping sobs of a woman realizing her power had evaporated. Leo slumped against the window frame, covering his face with his hands. My father just stared at me with pure, unadulterated hatred. I didn't look away. I didn't flinch. I let the discomfort wash over me, feeling the burn of it. For years, I had set myself on fire to keep them warm. Watching them shiver now didn't bring me joy, but it brought me a profound, terrifying clarity. The heavy oak doors swung open. 2 uniformed security officers, men I greeted every morning with a smile, stepped in. Their expressions were professional, blank. "Mr. and Mrs. Sterling," the lead officer said, gesturing toward the open door, "if you would, please." My father stood up, buttoning his suit jacket with shaking hands. He tried to summon the ghost of his old authority. "There is no need for a scene. We are leaving." He walked to the door just before the threshold. He didn't look back at me. "You are dead to us, Scarlett. Do you understand? If you do this, you have no family." I felt a phantom ache in my chest, an echo of the terrified girl I used to be. But the woman I was now simply nodded. "I accepted that death 15 years ago, Father. It's just taken you this long to attend the funeral." Eleanor stumbled after him, refusing to look at me, clutching her handbag like a shield. Leo was the last to move. He looked at me with eyes red-rimmed and hollow. "Scarly," he whispered, using the childhood nickname only he knew, a final, desperate manipulation. I felt a tear prick the back of my eye, hot and sharp. I didn't let it fall. "Goodbye, Leo." He sneered then, the mask dropping instantly when he realized the ploy had failed. He turned and marched out, the heavy door clicking shut behind him with a finality that echoed in my bones. I was alone. The silence returned, but this time the suffocating quality was gone. The room felt enormous. I exhaled, a breath that felt like it had been held for a decade. My legs, suddenly made of water, gave out, and I sank back into my chair. My hands were shaking. I held them up before my face, watching the tremors. It's done. I waited for the crushing guilt. I waited for the conditioned response, the voice in my head telling me I was selfish, ungrateful, bad. I waited for the panic that I had just severed the only biological tether I had to this earth. But it didn't come. Instead, I felt a strange, tingling emptiness.
It was the sensation of a heavy pack being dropped after a grueling hike. The muscles were sore, the skin was raw where the straps had dug in, but the weight was gone. I swiveled my chair around to face the window. The sun was beginning to dip, casting long golden shadows across the Chicago skyline. The city looked like a circuit board of light and glass. Energy.
Pulsing through its veins. I had built a kingdom down there. I had clawed my way up from a waitress at a diner to night school to entry-level grunt to CEO. I had done it all while carrying the ghost of their rejection on my back. What could I do now that I didn't have to carry them? The thought was dizzying. I stood up and walked to the small wet bar in the corner of the office. I poured a glass of sparkling water, the fizz loud in the quiet room. I took a sip, the cold carbonation biting my tongue. It tasted real. I caught my reflection in the mirror behind the bar. The woman staring back wasn't the scapegoat. She wasn't the disappointment. She was Scarlett Sterling. Her eyes were tired, yes, and there were fine lines of tension around her mouth that hadn't fully relaxed, but her jaw was set. Her shoulders were back. "You chose yourself," I whispered to the reflection. The words hung in the air, unauthorized and absolute. I grabbed my coat. I didn't want to be in this office anymore. This room had been the battlefield for the final war, and the air was still thick with the smoke of it. I needed to be outside. I bypassed the elevator to the garage and took the main lift to the lobby. When the doors opened, the evening rush was in full swing. People were blurring past, focused on their commutes, their dinner plans, their lives. I stepped out into the lobby, the marble floors clicking under my heels. The security guard at the front desk, the one who had escorted my family out, looked up as I approached. A flicker of concern crossed his face. "Everything all right, Miss Sterling?" "Yes, verify," I said, and a genuine smile touched my lips. "Everything is perfect. Have a good night." I pushed through the revolving doors and stepped out onto the sidewalk. The wind off the lake was brisk, carrying the scent of autumn, dry leaves, exhaust, and the crisp promise of winter. It hit my face, stinging my cheeks, and it felt magnificent. I closed my eyes, tilting my head back, letting the sensory overload of the street wash over me. The blare of a taxi horn, the rumble of the L train overhead, the chatter of tourists. For the first time in my life, the narrative belonged solely to me. There was no one waiting to critique my performance, no one waiting to bill me for my existence, no one waiting to frame me for their sins. I turned left, walking without a destination. I wasn't walking away from them anymore. I was walking towards something. As I moved through the crowd, blending in, becoming just another face in the city I had conquered, I realized that the dawn I had been fighting for wasn't a time of day. It was this. It was the ability to breathe without asking for permission. It was the terrifying, beautiful realization that from this moment forward, every mistake would be mine, but so would every victory. I pulled my coat tighter against the chill, but I didn't hail a cab. I wanted to walk. I wanted to feel the pavement under my feet. I wanted to feel the fatigue in my legs. I wanted to feel everything. The sun finally slipped behind the skyscrapers, plunging the street into the blue twilight. But inside, the darkness was receding. The long night of my childhood was finally over. I kept walking, one foot in front of the other, into the rest of my life.